It's easy to look at political institutions and think they're just permanent, like they were carved in stone. But the truth is, they're always changing, sometimes quietly, and sometimes, well, through some pretty explosive conflicts. Today, we're diving into the incredible evolution of the UK's House of Lords. It's really a story about how a chamber with almost absolute power was forced to find a totally new reason to even exist.
So what's the big picture here? Well, back in the day, the House of Lords held direct, serious power. I mean, it could make or break governments. But fast forward to now, and its role is completely different. It's all about restraint. It's a place for checking the details, for having second thoughts, but it absolutely does not get the final say anymore.
And that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, how does an institution just give up that kind of power? It almost never happens willingly. So what on earth was the political earthquake that forced such a radical shift?
For centuries, the whole system just kind of worked based on unwritten rules and traditions. There wasn't some big, formal constitution. It was more like a shared understanding. The House of Lords had power because, well, it always had. That was just an accepted part of how things were done, and it kept a sort of fragile peace.
But that delicate balance, it was never going to last forever. The change that was coming down the track wasn't some gentle, predictable evolution. Nope. When the change finally hit, it was born out of an intense, unavoidable political fight.
And this is where we get to the breaking point. As the democratically elected House of Commons started to gain more confidence, a stronger mandate from the people, this idea of having two competing centers of power just became completely unsustainable. It couldn't work.
This timeline really shows you how things escalated. I mean, for hundreds of years, convention kept everything in check. But then, in the early 20th century, the Lords started to really flex its muscles, actively blocking laws passed by the elected government. And the final showdown, the real flashpoint, was over budgets and taxes. The most fundamental thing any democratic government does.
This wasn't just a political spat. It was a genuine constitutional crisis. The question was no longer some theoretical debate. It was terrifyingly real. How can a democracy possibly function if an unelected chamber can just say no to the will of the people? The whole system had hit a wall. Something had to give.
So what do you do? Well, the solution wasn't to just abolish the whole thing. Instead, the political system started this massive, kind of messy project to completely redefine the Lord's role and create a new constitutional balance, one that actually fit a modernizing democracy.
And this new order was really built on two revolutionary ideas. First, ultimate authority, the final word, now belonged to the elected House of Commons. Simple as that. Democratic legitimacy was king. And second, the whole purpose of the Lords was officially shifted from ruling to reviewing. Its job was now to advise, to revise, and to improve, not to command.
This created this vital principle called scrutiny downstream. What it means is that the Lords' work can only happen after a democratic choice has been made by the Commons. It acts as a check, as a balance, but within the process, not as a veto sitting above the process. Think of it like a filter, not a dam.
And hey, this wasn't just a change in attitude. It was literally written into law. The Parliament Acts of 1911 and 1949 legally changed the Lords' absolute veto into just a delaying power. So they could force the government to think again, maybe for up to a year, but they could no longer block its way forever.
Okay, so with its ultimate power gone, you'd think the House of Lords might have just faded away, right? Become a historical relic. But that is not what happened. Instead, in this really remarkable institutional pivot, it adapted to survive, and in doing that, it found a completely new source of influence.
This was like a fundamental change in its DNA. The old authority, which was all based on inherited status and who your ancestors were, was replaced by a totally new kind of authority, one that came from professional expertise, from lived experience, and from deep, real-world knowledge. Influence now had to be earned, not just inherited.
So in practice, what does this look like? Well, it means you've got former health ministers in there debating new laws for the NHS. You've got retired Supreme Court judges picking apart the complex legal language of new bills. You get world-renowned scientists scrutinizing the evidence behind government policy. It's become this chamber of specialists, providing a kind of institutional memory and technical know-how that the fast-moving, politically focused House of Commons just often doesn't have.
But here's the thing you have to remember. This transformation wasn't the result of some big, grand plan. The House of Lords didn't hold a meeting and decide, hey, let's become a chamber of experts. It was this gradual, messy, and almost accidental adaptation to its new political reality. It just evolved to fill the role it had been left with. And that brings us right up to the present day, to the unresolved tensions of the modern House of Lords. Because this whole story of conflict, reform, and adaptation, it's far from over. And it's left the institution in this uniquely awkward, but sometimes pretty useful position.
This quote really just hits the nail on the head. The reform process that started over a century ago was a reaction to a crisis, but it was never actually finished. The system did a great job of stripping away the Lord's absolute power, but it never really gave it a clear, fully specified new purpose, leaving it in this state of permanent constitutional limbo.
So what you're left with is a House of Lords that's just a study in contradictions. It's absolutely weaker than it used to be, no question, but its detailed work on laws makes it way more useful than it often gets credit for. And while it carries all this history, that same history makes it harder to justify in a modern democracy.
And all of this leaves us with one final, really thought-provoking question to chew on. We've seen that the modern role of the Lords was born from a brutal fight for political power, not some quest for moral authority. Its job is supposed to be technical review, not to be the nation's conscience. So if that's the case, why do our modern debates about it so often sound like we're arguing about morality and ethics? Now that is a puzzle worth pondering.